Now, Mike Elko's no longer an option. It was a long shot, but that wasn't the only unlikely name out of the SEC that Penn State was targeting.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State football, and thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day, your daily source for all things Penn State sports. My name is Zach Seyko, and I'm your host of the show, credentialed media member for both Penn State football and Penn State wrestling. On today's show, Penn State's class of 2026 takes another massive hit. Why is this happening, though? Is it all James Franklin, or there are other factors at play? Plus, we're going to talk about the players that Penn State should retain, including is Ethan Grunkemeyer. We're going to debate if he's the QB of the future for the Nittany Lions. But Penn State's coaching search, that long shot of Mike Elko coming to Happy Valley is off the table. He's staying with Texas A&M, but there's another SEC coach that fits this similar description as a long shot. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Friendly reminder to let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. Be a part of the conversation. So we'll talk about the unlikely SEC coach, but also the odds of who Penn State's going to land, because while this is a long shot, you're telling me there's a chance. Yes, I am telling you there's a chance, and why it's worth monitoring for Penn State. And that's Alabama's Kalen DeBoer. Kalen DeBoer losing to Oklahoma. And I know that disgruntled fans on message boards don't speak for the entirety of the football fan base or the football program, but it's certainly, rumors have been circulating since Penn State had opened up its head coaching job that, hey, is everything, this was on ESPN, this wasn't just on message boards, ESPN talked about this as well, that not all things are perfect between Kalen DeBoer and Alabama. So again, allegedly, of course, but if things continue to take a turn at Alabama where DeBoer and the people, the powers that be in Tuscaloosa don't see it as a fit for the future, Penn State, it is an ideal job. It's not, now Alabama is a higher caliber job. I'm not afraid to admit that Bama is the better football program to be at, but Penn State's not too far behind. These are both top 10 programs. Now, Alabama firmly within the top 10, Penn State, a fringe top 10 program in all of college football. Nevertheless, it's not like it's a major step backwards for DeBoer, and Penn State is going to be willing to commit the resources, willing to commit NIL as well. So it would be a good setup. And while he's not from the Northeast and there isn't that familiarity, he does by proxy actually have some experience with Big Ten football now, because coaching at Washington, he made the championship as Washington's head coach. Washington, of all places. And that's how he landed the Alabama job. But maybe you don't realize, hey, at the time, when you initially come to that agreement, might not be the best fit. You don't realize it until you go through the time. So we'll see, because people are circling that Auburn game, the Iron Bowl. If Alabama were to drop that and be on the cusp of potentially missing the college football playoff, well, that might be to Penn State's benefit, and they might want to wait out that situation, because then those odds go from 5%, I'd put that at, to significantly higher than that, to say the least. Penn State should absolutely want Kalen DeBoer for a variety of reasons. Well, he's not winning at Alabama, and then why was he winning at Washington? Okay, so Kalen DeBoer has shown that he is capable of leading a program to a national title, which is why Alabama obviously took a chance on him after Nick Saban. If it doesn't work out in Alabama, that would be your long shot, whale type of hire for Penn State, and why you would fire James Franklin in the middle of the season like that. But let's talk about the likelier ones, because we're discussing the odds. Where does everything stand right now? Well, Eli Drinkwitz is certainly the favorite as we sit here, and discuss this on a Monday, November 17th. This is my Monday show. And Eli Drinkwitz is, do we want to call it an overwhelming favorite at this point? I think that's fair to say, because from what I've had sources tell me, And what other people are hearing as well, that Drinkwitz seems to be the leading candidate here. It doesn't mean that a deal is done. It doesn't mean that a deal is being finalized, but it means that he's the most likely candidate, because some of the other candidates, are they going to be making a postseason run? That's why Kalen DeBoer, one of the reasons that Penn State doesn't have him necessarily as a primary target, because are you looking to make that hire in the middle of January, or do you want to make that late in November, early December here? But we're getting close to somewhat of an arbitrary finish line. And Drinkwitz not making the postseason is a big deal. That's why Brian Hartline, I mean, that's a difficult situation. I think Penn State would actually make Brian Hartline the candidate, the choice. But the reason there's skepticism with his hire, well, aside from, from the outside, it's, well, he doesn't have enough head coaching experience. Fine. But let's talk about it logistically. He's not a head coach. He is an offensive coordinator. So he doesn't get the luxury of a transfer portal window opening up after a coaching hire is made. A micro portal window opens. So if Drinkwitz can just have all of his SEC Missouri players follow him to Penn State for the most part, right? So is that Bo Pribula? Is that Hardy, the running back? There are tons of Big Ten caliber players that are already at Missouri that would get the chance to follow him. So Penn State timing might be everything. If you don't, again, if you're going to land the whale that is Kalen DeBoer, that is worth waiting. But in a situation like this, thinking about next season, that's why Drinkwitz seems to be the favorite here. And I would put those odds at probably 30 to 40%. Everybody else, well, who else is Penn State still considering at this point? Okay, realistic candidates. I want to talk about realistic candidates. I would put Jeff Brom and Brent Key as two coaches. Again, it's kind of similar category as Drinkwitz, but since everything that I've heard and all the other consistent reporting by other outlets, that Drinkwitz is the favorite decisively at this point. But Brent Key and Jeff Brom aren't too far behind. I would put their odds. So if we're putting Drinkwitz at maybe 40%, I would say that Brent Key and Jeff Brom are probably even at 20%. And then you would put somebody like a Brian Hartline at 10%. The benefit of hiring Brent Key or Jeff Brom is because you've seen them elevate programs. And like Drinkwitz, you've seen them elevate programs like a Missouri in the SEC or a Georgia Tech. I know it's in the ACC, but you've seen them elevate these programs and make them better. They're giving you, and the hope is that you can elevate them. So I'm not here to debate necessarily who the best candidate is, but to lay the odds out of where everything stands. Kalen DeBoer is going to be a situation that Penn State is going to monitor and is kind of rooting against Bama in that situation. That would be their top candidate. That is the whale hire. But in terms of all likelihood, Eli Drinkwitz, Brent Key, and Jeff Brom probably tied for that second spot. Brian Hartline is that next coach. Maybe a Bob Chesney is in there as well from James Madison, but he's going through a playoff run and he's a group of 5 head coach. I like Chesney at time, but I can see why Penn State would opt for Brom or Key as opposed to Chesney, because they've been at the Power 4 level, even though I think it's going to Big Ten and SEC Power 2, so to speak. But you get my point there. That's where things stand as of today. And frankly, for the past week, where Drinkwitz is the favorite. Brom and Key are still realistic targets. I would take Brian Hartline over all of them. I'm willing to sacrifice one season to get Brian Hartline because I think it is worth the risk with the upside and potential that he has. We'll see how it all unfolds, and we'll continue to monitor it. Same thing with James Franklin landing potentially at Virginia Tech, right? This is all, it's great to talk about. I've actually enjoyed this coaching search a lot because of how entertaining and following along with all the rumors, all the bits of news, and seeing where it leads. But we're getting close to the end here, potentially. This decision could be made in a matter of a couple of weeks. And with that being said, regardless of who Penn State's next head coach is, You can do yourself a lot of favors by retaining some of the already talented players that are in Happy Valley. Who are those players and why should they be prioritized? That's coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at an even bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's right, $300 in bonus bets to new customers. And that can be used on anything from the NBA to NFL, college football. Lines are available for Penn State versus Nebraska. Penn State is a decent favorite here against the Cornhuskers. 9.5-point favorites, minus 365 on the money line, plus 285 if you're thinking Nebraska for an upset. The total is set at 44.5. If you like those lines, you can bet them over at FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. And remember, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Penn State's going to be active in the transfer portal one way or another. But the head coach can do himself a favor by retaining some of these key players. So let's debate quarterback first, and then I'll get to the other names that you absolutely want staying around in Happy Valley, because quarterback is the most important position in college football. You also don't want to go chase somebody down if there's not another better option out there. Ethan Grunkemeyer did not look good in his first couple of starts. But then in the second half of Indiana and selectively against Michigan State, right, that was in a game where he had to air it out. Penn State was willing to sit on the lead and do what it had to do. But he's taken steps forward. And I see potential with Grunkemeyer. I would have no issue with a future head coach saying, Grunkemeyer is going to be our quarterback, because you get 3 more years of eligibility with him. He is somebody that does have upside, again, is improving. Let's not be too harsh on Grunkemeyer here. He went on the road at Kinnick for his first start against a top 5 defense, then went on the road in Columbus against a number 1 defense and a number 1 team overall in the Ohio State Buckeyes. And then the second half against the number 2 Indiana Hoosiers, a top 10 defense in its own right, was where he started to put it together. So I am not willing to write off Grunkemeyer as Penn State's quarterback of the future after 2 games. I want to focus on the tape that he's put together against Indiana, particularly in the second half, and then against in select throws, again, because he didn't throw the ball around against Michigan State, so there's not a lot to take away from there. But he did have that 75-yard bomb to Devontae Ross. He has shown me enough that he is a capable quarterback at Penn State for 2-3 years. Okay. Now, but here's going to be the point of contention. If Penn State goes and gets Eli Drinkwitz, Bo Prabula is going to follow him back, right? Matt Zollers would probably follow as well. Well, that's another thing. Do you want to go back to being a backup quarterback? So would you take Bo Prabula for 1 year or Grunkemeyer for potentially multiple years? That's the debate, because I don't know that I see here's the take that not everybody is going to agree with. Other than Bo Prabula's ability to be a dual threat quarterback, how much more upside does he give you than Grunk? Because from what I've seen, when it comes to them passing the football, they're actually fairly, I would say Grunkemeyer is clearly the better passer. But as far as equal quarterbacks, so then if you bring in Bo Prabula on a 1 year stint, you're back in the transfer portal for another quarterback, because I don't think Grunk's going to go and sit the bench for a year. And the same thing with Matt Zollers. I'm a little skeptical there. Would he come and be a backup knowing that, okay, now if you get a package duo of Bo Prabula for 1 year and then your quarterback of the future, which is a former 5-star in Matt Zollers, who has some SEC starting experience because of the injury to Prabula, that's kind of hard to pass up there if Penn State happens to go in the direction of Eli Drinkwitz. But Grunk has proven to me that he is a power four starting quarterback. He's getting better. And the play calling really wasn't setting him up for success as well. So I still think we're going to see better from Grunkemeyer to this point in time. So I am all for Grunk being the QB of the future at Penn State. Now, you do need to build around him. So on offense, going to go a little quickly here so that I can just name key players. Let's start with wide receiver. Okay. You got to keep Kobe Howard around. You got to keep Tyser Denmark around. Those two guys, because you want to give weapons to Grunkemeyer to throw to. Kobe Howard in particular, as a true freshman, he's worked his way into the rotation. He's doing everything. He's blocking. He's getting open in one-on-ones, making contested catches. Howard, if he transfers out, that's going to be rough. I know that Penn State will be able to bring in other wide receivers at the end of the day. One player doesn't make or break everything. But Howard's a player that what you have with him. You want to keep him around. And Tyser Denmark, he and Howard were going to be the projected starters for next season. So those are two starting caliber wide receivers for 2026. On the offensive line, another pair of players here, Cooper Cousins. Cooper Cousins would have been your projected starter at center. TJ Shanahan, same thing. Two interior offensive linemen. I'll throw a name out there because we haven't heard from him a ton this season. Malachi Goodman, former 5-star offensive lineman. There's your interior offensive line right there. However you want to move them. Left, center, right guard. Those are your three. If you start there, because offensive line, they say the battle is won in the trenches. Everything's won up front. Okay, well, you get a good start there with 3 former 5-star high school prospects. And good players that have developed accordingly as starters for next season. And then makes your job a little bit easier on the offensive line. And then, running back, you're probably going to have to go into the transfer portal there. Let's talk about tight end, because you have a former 5-star with Luke Reynolds. I know it hasn't looked perfect, but Luke Reynolds still has a ton of upside. Andrew Rapplier, kind of like Cooper Cousins, another glue guy, another captain type of player who can lead a future team. I'm not here to say what if or what's going to happen or if James Franklin lands at Virginia Tech, right? I'm not here to debate that today. What I am here to debate is who you should prioritize in maintaining on next year's roster. The wide receivers, those few of offensive linemen, and then Luke Reynolds and Andrew Rapplier together. Now on the defensive side of the football, really predicated on, are you going with Jim Knowles' defense? Are you going with somebody else, right? In year 2 of a system, it would be valuable to maintain as many players as possible. I'm starting with Tony Rojas and Amari Campbell, and I know that's going to be tough to do. I know it's going to be tough to maintain both of them to stay because they don't have ties to Pennsylvania immediately. They're both from Virginia. So, you got to watch James Franklin and Virginia Tech. But again, not here to debate that today. I'm here to debate who should be at the top of Penn State's list when prioritizing who to retain. You don't want to just go find a full new roster of 85 different players. If you have talent already, that especially if you do retain Jim Knowles as the defensive coordinator, why not keep some of the players that already know his system and will help you in year 2 as it is? So Tony Rojas and Amari Campbell should absolutely be the priority because they were flourishing when both of them were healthy together, were flourishing in Jim Knowles' defense. I would add another linebacker here, Alex Tatch. I would try to keep him. He's worked his way into the rotation quickly as a true freshman. We've harped on linebacker depth here. If you can maintain those 3, that is a good foundation for next season. 2 veterans, 2 tackling machines who can cover sideline to sideline, and then an up-and-comer like Alex Tatch. That is going to be key. In the secondary, Darius Dixon. Darius Dixon has had a phenomenal game. Actually, both weeks. He performed very well against Indiana and then performed extremely well against Michigan State. He's all the way from California, so that's going to be difficult to bridge there. But if Terry Smith's still on staff, right? He was a part of that defensive back room. So never say never there. But again, we're talking about who Penn State should prioritize. And then I know I've gone a little out of order here. Let's go back to the trenches. Chaz Coleman. Chaz Coleman, is he going to go to Ohio State? Is he going to go back home to the state of Ohio? Maybe, but he should be at the top of your list. I've made the comparisons to Abdul Carter because he does possess the same traits that Carter does as just a natural pass rusher. And Coleman, who didn't play a lot of defensive end in high school, really is just starting out. I would say that he's in year 2 of the process overall of just being an edge defender, and he's already seen playing time right out of the gate. Give him another offseason to develop. Put him in the weight room. Give him more time to perfect those defensive end moves. This guy is a premier pass rusher and has first-round draft pick written all over him. I mean it when I say that. I'm not exaggerating. This guy does resemble Abdul Carter in a lot of ways. Would love to see him stay at Penn State because he is just going to be a disruptive playmaker. And you don't want him at Ohio State, right? You want him to be at Penn State, let alone not at Ohio State. So those are the players that I would try to prioritize, regardless of who the next head coach is for Penn State. Now, speaking of player movement, the transfer portal, the class of 2026, it just keeps getting decimated. More bad news for Penn State as their top prospect has decommitted. Why is this happening? We need to get to the bottom of that too and talk about the impact of Penn State losing Kevin Brown. That is coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. We all love college football. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands. There's just nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel more like a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why you got to use Gametime, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. You can pull up Gametime, and in just a couple of taps, you'll see amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite college football games for as low as $25. And one of the great features about Gametime is that you get to see your point of view ahead of time. If you go into Gametime and you choose your seats, you can see what it's going to look like from that section, from that seat. So there's no second guessing. There's no wondering, especially when you've never been to a stadium or a venue and you're going for the first time. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that is promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. Penn State's top overall prospect decommitted over the weekend. Why is this happening? Kevin Brown is going to make a decision relatively soon. He gave a hint as far as where he's going to end up. So let's try to break down why this is happening. Does it have to do with James Franklin? Are all the prospects decommitting simply because James Franklin is not the head coach anymore? That's one of the reasons, but that's not the only reason here. Before I get to that, let me tell you about Kevin Brown, and this is a big deal. While Penn State will be able to overcome it, one player does not define the program or define a recruiting class. But if you could have retained anybody in this class of 2026, for me, it's Kevin Brown. Kevin Brown, he's listed as a 4-star. He plays like a 5-star. So the rankings are just behind. This is a guy that probably would have ended up being a captain at Penn State, would be a captain wherever he goes. I think he's that kind of caliber of player. I've watched him in person. I've watched his film. The guy is as great as advertised, and he's a leader. He already has leader capabilities already. So where's he going to end up? Ohio State was pushing for him. Dad went to West Virginia, and that's the hint. Is Kevin Brown, it's been reported that he's actually going to go on the Pat McAfee show. Well, Pat McAfee is an alum of West Virginia, and I think that is a fitting place if he's going to follow in Dad's footsteps. Commit live on ESPN and Pat McAfee's talk show, then so be it. Hey, all right, good for West Virginia to carry on, right, the legacy and everything else. Good for Kevin Brown, if that ends up being the case and not having to play against him or not having to worry about him within the conference. Really good player, somebody that this also somewhat creates potentially a domino effect as well, because of Kevin Brown. He had the capability to potentially hold this class of 2026 together a little bit better. It would have been players like him that set the example. But as one by one players start to go, Messiah Mickens is projected to land at Oklahoma alongside Jasir Rogers, a former Penn State wide receiver commit in this 2026 class. David Davis flips to North Carolina. Matt Sieg, there's potential that he either ends up at Notre Dame or Pitt, even though he's still currently, as I'm recording this, verbally committed to Penn State. So why is this happening? Is this the James Franklin effect? Everybody was, because Penn State's lost 17 commitments now in this class of 2026. And then when you compare Florida, when you compare LSU, the numbers 1, 2 prospects, there are a couple elements at play. One of them is James Franklin. Okay, so James Franklin used to actually recruit this way. And maybe this is, again, one of the reasons why we are where we are, because James Franklin always said, commit to me as the coach, me as the person. Don't commit to Penn State. Don't commit to his message was, don't commit to an assistant coach, because they might go for another job. They might get a promotion. They might go to the NFL, right? His message was, well, I'm going to be here long-term, so commit to me. He wasn't saying commit to the university. So that kind of is a double-ended sword. We never thought we'd get here, right? We never thought that James Franklin would be fired like this in the middle of the season. But here we are. So there is part of it that a lot of relationships in recruiting were built between James Franklin and the prospect themselves on a personal level. So that is going to matter. Number 2 is the way that Penn State handled its NIL with prospects. And this is kind of a 2A, 2B. The 2A part of it is the fact that, okay, Penn State didn't really pay out a lot of money, allegedly, in NIL to prospects. That was one of the things about Penn State. Maybe that's going to change. Maybe that is changing. But clearly, when you have 17 players change their minds in this process and start to look elsewhere, it's because there's nothing guaranteeing them. LSU and Florida, by comparison, I feel like they have strong NIL deals in place as an incentive to say, okay, why don't you wait out the next coaching hire to see? So here's the 2B part of it. Agents, a lot of these prospects, and maybe some, maybe half, I don't want to speak for everybody, but there are prospects that are represented by agencies and agents that are telling them, you need to flip, you need to commit. You don't know what you're getting from Penn State at this point in time. And if there aren't enough financial guarantees, you might as well go somewhere else. So there's a lot of factors here that are competing against Penn State. It's not only the absence of James Franklin, but it's also the fact that, again, there's going to be agents. There's now money on the line. People are making decisions. You can't just wait out Penn State and wait out a head coaching search and say, well, maybe, right? You need some incentive to want to stay at Penn State. So more than just, hey, Penn State's a really great institution. More than that. Oh, we're going to get a really good head coach. You can't just automatically trust that. And you are still seeing some players still committed, but their recruitment for the most part is reopened. Again, the head coach, depending on when they are hired, are going to have to do a lot of heavy lifting here. The 2026 class is most likely going to be compromised here. And at the end of the day, that's okay, because you have the transfer portal. You can go and recruit from, think of getting prospects instead of a 2026 class full of underdeveloped freshmen. You can go get veteran players for the short term from the group of 5 level. Again, Penn State's still going to be an attractive place to play for somebody. It might not be this class of 2026 for whatever the reason is, but if there are the prospects that are still interested, whether that's an in-state prospect or if Terry Smith is still going to be around, because I think that the fact that the class still hasn't gone to 0 is still pretty telling of the impact that Terry Smith has made as the interim head coach, just trying to be a glue guy and keep it all together. But Penn State is still going to appeal to a lot of other players because it's in the Big Ten. It's still Penn State. There are a lot of eyeballs on this program, and you want to get to the NFL, right? So you want to play at a top tier level, and that's what Penn State can still offer as an institution, regardless of the head coach. So it's important to get a head coach in time for the transfer portal, because if you try to hire, okay, that's the risk with somebody, like a Brian Hartline, for example, because he doesn't have that micro transfer portal window. And if he goes in a late postseason run and then you bring him in and you miss part or all of the transfer portal, that's going to be an uphill battle. That's one of the reasons why, hey, this hire might be a little skeptical. I digress from that. But Penn State can go and recruit other Power 4 school players that are in the portal, other Group of 5 players that are in the portal. It worked out for Indiana. They got a quick turnaround. Penn State can do the same thing. It's going to be a quick turnaround, to say the least, about this. So, and again, a lot of these players, again, other than a few exceptions in the class of 2026, they were going to be backups or players that needed 2-3 years to finally make an impact at Penn State. So I hope to see some of these names still stay on board with Penn State, but it's still unlikely. But never say never at the end of the day. That's where I'll leave things with the class of 2026, and that's where we'll wrap things up here on this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Appreciate each and every one of you for checking out the show. Friendly reminder to let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. If you are new, subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. Thanks so much for joining me here.